Hey guys, what's going on? Today in this video we're going to walk through a pugged Waycrest 22. I want to talk about everything that kind of went right in this run and what went wrong in this run. I'll talk about build, my kind of logic around pulls. This route was kind of weird because we ended up making some adjustments during the key because we wanted specific lust timings for bosses. It is a tyrannical week. We're also seeing bursting and entangling. Luckily, Brewmaster Monk has Tiger's Lust for almost every entangling unless you're using it, for movement speed or to remove it on other people, but these affixes are pretty simple. So starting off the run, we're going to pull this entire kind of, foyer area, just all of the ghosts, and blow them up really quick. This is a pretty standard pull. I can't imagine that you're ever going to want to split this stuff up as long as you have decent group lockdown with things like Chaos Nova. We have Leg Sweep. We also have an Og Evoker who has a ton of knockups as well as CC, so I'm not really too worried about this pull. Other groups can pull this off. Leg Sweep is pretty powerful. Wait till you see a bunch of casts, throw a Leg Sweep. I'm sitting in Zen Med here just because we are at 7 stacks of bursting, and then we're going to go towards these sisters, the Triad. Now the build for this dungeon, I was running Charred Passions. I still don't have 4 set yet, but I do have the new 2 set. I have been doing a ton of testing between, do you run old 4 set still? Do you run a 2-2 split? Do you just run the new 2 set and then go for item level? Because the tier set from last season wasn't super great in terms of defense if you look at the 2 set by itself. So it's actually, I personally think it's worth, if you have the new 2 set and you have other items of stronger item level, you should throw those on and get rid of your old 2 and 4 set entirely. But it's really up to you and how you feel. I will have my build down below. I'll have both my Raider.io link as well as my talent build, so if you want to use it. Because it's a tyrannical week, Brewmaster Monk is always kind of excelled on tyrannical weeks because of just the way that Stagger is. You're extremely tanky against just hard-hitting bosses because of Stagger, and then mobs obviously don't hurt as much because it's not Fort Week. So I'm running a very aggressive damage build. I'm running both Bandolier as well as Midas Talisman. So what you're seeing here on this pull is I'm pulling both sides of the room, and then I do we line of sight out to get them stacked. I'm trying to knock them out here, but I think someone accidentally ends up pulling the boss at some point, and then our Evoker lusts thinking that the boss was pulled, and we do a reset. So we actually lose. So it was the Demon Hunter who accidentally fell rushed forward and pulled them. So this guy yells, this guy said fuck in party chat, and my initial reaction is to pull them out, though. Because this is a pug, our Evoker thought we were pulling, so he lusted. So not only did we lust, but we also had a death there. So kind of rough. I asked why lust. Now the Evoker is in my guild, so he says I'm dumb, and I make fun of him here, but it's all, it's all in friendly spirit. He said I'm dumb sometimes, and I said no shit. So this boss, I see a lot of DPSs and tanks lose damage on this boss because they don't realize that the targets, the Triad or the sisters are swapping around. Unfortunately, I get an add-on error here. But basically, you're always going to start Selena, then it's going to go to Malady, then Briar. But as soon as they hit 50% health, you kind of want to start looking to swap when you see the Claim the Iris cast. So I see Malady's doing it, so now I'm targeting her. Oftentimes, people will kind of forget, or what happens is, the first mind control comes out, so people kind of panic there, and they'll swap to that target, but then when they target back, they start hitting the wrong boss. And then during the Malady portion of the fight, as a tank, I like to kind of go into this alcove and just jump in place, so it gives melee room to spread out during the Runic Brand cast. Unfortunately, we're going to get 2 of them here. Normally, you want to try to only get 1, but it is a higher key. Now, luckily, Tiger's Lust is super nice on these kind of fights where you have to do spread mechanics, so instead of having to move at all, I can just stand still in Tiger's Lust myself. So Briar's now claiming the Iris. I'm swapping to her to make sure I have threat. And we are trying to stack them up, not necessarily for cleave because they are taking 99% reduced damage, but you want to stack them up so kicks are easier to grab if you need to. And there are classes that do benefit from funnel, so if there's close targets that they can hit off of and generate resource, they're going to be able to do more single target damage to the priority target. Now, something that we didn't do well on this fight when I was looking back at this, and I also noticed this while we were doing it, but we weren't really kicking. You do want to kick these bolts whenever possible. They just add group damage. It's not required, but in a high enough key, a couple of bolts hitting the same target with another mechanic will typically be lethal. So now we're back on Selena. This is kind of the back half of the fight. The idea is you want to be able to push them before they hit 100 energy, because once they hit 100 energy, they do basically, it's like called Dire Ritual, and they'll pretty much one-shot everyone in the room. So as long as you're pushing them to 50% before they hit 50 energy, you're typically on pace. Now, we did do this fight pretty much without lust, since we lusted on the reset, but it's fairly easy. In higher keys, you might need to allocate certain CDs to certain points. Immunities are great. Paladin's great in this place with Bop, especially for the Jagged Nettles. But the scariest part of the fight, I would say, is Malady for group damage, and then Briar for single target healing. The first boss, Selena, I don't ever feel like is that scary. That's kind of your breathing room. But when you have just these last two left, you're kind of panicking a little bit. As a DPS, as a Brewmaster, there's not much you can do about the Jagged Nettles cast for players. You kind of have to just hope that that player is using a defensive, and then the healer is spot healing them. So that boss goes down, and we're going to go to the left here. Now, this is a very hold W route. I guess I'll also have my route linked down below. There is a potential witch spawn in this area. I don't know if it rotates per week, but basically you need to make sure you kill 2 secret stealth witches before you go downstairs. Luckily, there's one going to be in the kitchen by Raal's room, so we'll grab that there. But this pull is pretty just like chill. It's a good recovery pull for the courtyard, because the courtyard gets pretty hectic, especially on bursting weeks. There's a lot of kicks, there's a lot of things to dodge, and obviously bursting is going to cause an issue for our healer as well as our group. In this pull specifically, you just want to watch out for the Shadow Cleave from the captains, and they also do this like barrier cast. You want to kick it. Spirited Defense, there we go. If you don't kick it, it can be purged. It's a pretty sizable DR for the mobs, so if you want this pull to die like quickly, you want to make sure you're kicking, and if not kicking, you want to make sure you're purging. Also, Demon Hunters just do so much damage all the time. This is crazy. So Courtyard, I want to try to not do like crazy. This is the pull that will wipe your group every time. Not in terms of like it's a hard pull, but with bursting, all of these hounds burst. So when you do this pull, I could have broken this up, but I honestly didn't really care. It was a pug. I was just like, I'm just going to pull this to be, you know, just too big damn. And we end up rolling. So it's like from 7 to 8 to 9 to 10 to 11. And then we get 12. And I'm going to sit in Zen Med again, and my entire group's going to die. I live, and I'll let them run back. So basically, realistically, you probably shouldn't do that pull on bursting weeks. You should probably pull the patrol of dogs back into the hallway, blow them up, let your healer kind of handle that, and then do the courtyard. But I'm an idiot. On this pull here, I'm going to try to grab, because I don't like 2-target cleave, I'm going to grab like the first little portion of this hallway by Raal's room, just so my DPS can optimize their damage a little bit. When you only pull 2 targets, there aren't many classes in the game that benefit, or not benefit, but like are good on 2-target cleave. Most classes ideally want 5, if not more. Fury Warriors, ideal in 5. Obviously, Evoker, it doesn't really matter. And then DH is just good in kind of all aspects. So I want to pretty much always be pulling 5 targets when you're running with a Fury Warrior. So here again, I'm going to pull some more in the hallway just to come back out. And then we'll clear the rest of the courtyard. Now, this is where we kind of were like, maybe we should wait to have Lust for the Goliath. Raal is more of a controlling counter that you're not likely to wipe on, but the Goliath can get messy quickly. The Soul Thorns does a ton of damage and requires you to do good damage. The tank also needs to pace out whenever they drop the boss's stacks, because it causes group damage and it causes, you know, fiery ads to start swinging at your random group members. So you need to kind of pace out the fight, and it really relies on the tank. The tank is in complete control on this encounter, so we wanted Lust for it, and we felt like we didn't need Lust for Raal. Now that one died, I'm going to chain in the mini boss. Now, something that people don't really know here is that everything out in the courtyard here is like a wicker mob, and they'll take actually damage from the fire that's on the ground. So if you get lucky with a close fire patch, you want to drag Brindle over to one. So someone's here saying pull him in fire. Like I knew, but I was waiting for a closer fire pool. You have to move her between like Thorn Barrage and her other mechanic, which I don't remember the name of right now, but it's basically the splintered spikes. So in between these casts, it's kind of difficult to move her, but you want to kind of position. So I know that she's doing this channel. I see which fire I'm going to move to, which is to my left. Right when this cast finishes, I'm going to try to drag her over. Oh, a new fire spawn. I forgot about this. So The fire doesn't last long, but you can actually see the debuff under her nameplate, and it's a set amount based on the dungeon level. So when you pull her into fire, she's going to be taking like 40k extra damage per second, which is like having an extra DPS with you. I think it might be more at this level, but... So with 3 minutes left, we decide to actually start pulling Raal's area so we can lust this boss. So I'm pinging here to make sure my group knows that I'm going to be pulling out. I have to be a little bit careful. I was looking for the patrolling steward. He wasn't there, so I pulled the other steward instead. And then it's just basically big damage. DPS do need to be careful when the tank's doing this, because if the tank isn't running back with the mobs, like I transcended back there, there's going to be a ton of threat issues right on pull, especially with the Demon Hunter. So making sure you have things like Exploding Keg, waiting for mobs to be grouped for Keg Smash, and once that happens, then your DPS can rip. If you have people ripping from you as a tank here, it's their fault, not really yours. It's harder to run back with these mobs as a Brewmaster because of lack of self-healing compared to other tanks. So being able to roll in, quickly grab mobs with just like Keg Smash and Breath of Fire and Chi Wave, then transcending back allows you to kind of prepare yourself as well as your group. So now I'm going to be running in, grabbing all of this trash, or trying to. That pig for some reason didn't want to come to me, transcending back. Now, luckily this group pretty much knew that they always should be staying outside. This is going to be a kind of a smaller pull too. The big things to look out for here are the maggots and Festcast. You don't want too many of them going off. If you have a couple, that's all right, but you don't want to have too many because they do a ton of damage. So I'm ring of piecing this guy out, and then I'm going to run back in, and I'm going to try to get the rest of the room. I'm making a decision here to try to grab more. I'm going to commit the Celestial Brew because I'm a little nervous, and I know I don't have Transcendence yet because it's a 1 minute cooldown once you use it, and then just grouping it up. The stewards are a little obnoxious with their big circle, but as long as you keep them near the wall and everyone knows to move out of it, you'll be fine. And then the Gorgers, these like pig men, they do a frontal cast called Wretch. Now, if you're lucky, it'll typically line up with the steward. So he'll do his dinner bell, and then they cast Wretch, and it's a small frontal, so you know if everyone's running out of it, you don't have to stop it because no one's going to be near the mobs anyways. If not, you can always just throw a kick, but we're kind of just chilling. This pull's going to go down. I think we do one more pull because there's 30 seconds left on Lust, and I see about 20 seconds on Meta. So this will be the last pull. This one's going to be really easy, just a couple pigs and a peasant along with some maggots. Now the reason I'm grabbing all of this is because once we go downstairs, we want to make sure we're at 100% because running back afterwards is really obnoxious. Now if you saw there was a steward at 20% health left. My group still stayed out. They didn't really chase him in because fighting inside is just obnoxious with all the different frontals. So pulling out to the courtyard, while it might be a little bit of a time loss, you have a much easier time keeping your group members alive because you're not in confined like spaces. So I recommend always pulling out, but sometimes it's hard to make sure that pugs are staying out here. So, all right, we're looking good. We have all of our cooldowns up. Some maggots did spawn. I was thinking about chaining these into boss, but they can provide a lot of kind of additional group damage that I'm not really in the mood to deal with. So we're just going to finish them off. Also, healer needs mana. This fight, like I said earlier, is pretty much everything is controlled by the tank. The only thing the group really needs to make sure that they're doing is staying in melee, so you don't have to move the boss very far for soul thorns. Outside of that, the tank should drop whenever it looks like your healer is ready. So I see that he has Bubble, he has Bop, he has Aura Mastery, and he has Wings. Paladins also have some other additional kind of throughput cooldowns that I'm not really tracking, like Divinity, and they also have Hand of Tyr, or is it Hand of... whatever the Tyr thing is called. And as long as they have something up, I know that dropping in fire is going to be good. My general rule of thumb is you should be dropping right after the second Soul Thorns is defeated. So here's Soul Thorn number 2. We're going to be trying to defeat it here, and then I'm going to be looking for a fire patch. Now, unfortunately, the closest fire patch wasn't... well, it was over by this tree, and then it disappeared, and then another one spawned on this bush. So I'm trying to get him there quickly, and then this is the big group damage that we want to be careful of, but it's also those ads that are being spawned by him. You can kind of see, like, the fiery ghosts. Those need to be... you want to kite away from those guys because they'll start meleeing people, and that's pretty much what causes a lot of deaths, especially if it overlaps with the Soul Thorn cast. So yeah, normally around 20 is when you want to start looking to drop. Now, there are tanks who will hold it longer. I see this question asked quite a bit. Does it increase the damage he does by Soul Thorns and stuff? It doesn't appear that it does. You just need to make sure you actually break the Soul Thorns immediately. But here we're at 20 stacks. I see AM and he has wings available, so I'm trusting that he's going to pop some kind of throughput cooldown here. He pops AM really late. And then I think he ends up committing the wings. But as you can see, those ghosts are trying to melee our paladin. He just needs to make sure he's cutting those out. Soulthorns gets just absolutely nuked. And then we're just kind of vibing. So now at the point in the fight, I'm trying to debate if I'm willing to drop again or if I want to tank this guy for 30 stacks or 40 stacks. And honestly, it's not worth the risk. While Brewmaster is really strong, there's going to be a big enough hit where even if I do stagger the blow, it'll pretty much one-shot me regardless. So I need to kind of be aware of that. So I decide to drop one more time. We're going to drop after the next Soulthorns cast. We get fire to spawn here. Oh, I don't even wait. So I just go right in. The risk of going in this early is that he's going to follow this with a potential Soulthorn cast immediately. And if that stuns a DPS next to a mob they're getting meleeed by, they're just going to die. So our warrior got stunned, and he's taking really big damage here, and then he ends up falling. So that was a bad decision on my end. I could have probably held because I had Dampen, I had Zen Med still, and while Nizao is kind of weak, I had him as well. Boss goes down with only one death. I'm actually kind of happy with that. Now, the Holy Paladin decided to bop really early on that fight. I prefer holding bop until later when you're going for like a tunnel, because then Soulthorn comes out, you don't even have to worry about it. You just remove that person from the thing immediately. Early in the boss fight, people have cooldowns and stuff, so I don't. It's like hard to determine, but I prefer having the bop late. We're gonna do kitchen. There is a witch in here, and there's that steward. You don't want that steward really coming into the boss fight because it can provide a lot. It could cause a lot of issues with the way that Wretch and the dinner bell will overlap. So just clearing them beforehand. Just make sure you pull 3 stewards. That's pretty much your count. When you're clearing the boss room, there's a steward on either side of the boss in those packs, and then there's one that patrols in and out of the kitchen across the entire room. So that's one thing you want to keep in the back of your mind when tanking this dungeon. And then, yeah, it's just, these guys kind of go down nice and slow. I don't think we ended up having a curse spell, so that thing is doing a lot of damage to people. Well, yeah, once we do Raal, we should have Lust, at least 2 more Lust for the dungeon if we actually ended up needing it. But Raal is probably one of the easier fights in this place. It's kind of hectic, but as long as you make sure ads are getting defeated and the boss or the tank is staying in boss melee range, there isn't a whole lot of dangerous portions of this fight. The only annoying part about it is on entangling weeks, obviously. You kind of have to make sure you're not running out of range. I know some other tanks might struggle a little bit with that, but with the Brewmaster, it's as simple as just Tiger's Lusting yourself. While this fight's pretty simple, I do want to talk about the idea of kind of maximizing damage here. So I talked about it earlier, but I'm running Bandolier and Midas Talisman. These are probably 2 of your strongest damage trinkets. It ends up doing, those 2 items alone end up doing, I think, over the course of a key, about 5% of my damage in single targets. The Midas Talisman competes with the top damage because it basically makes your next 5 auto attacks deal 90k-ish damage to the target for the next 5 auto attacks, which is just really, really, really strong. And it also gets scaled by damage amps, not from like press the advantage and stuff, but if a boss is taking increased damage, it just does a ton. So using that on cooldown whenever it's available just is super, super nice. The Bandolier in single target doesn't do as much damage, though it is a little bit more convenient to use because it's just you slam it and then it just does damage after 3 seconds. But in AoE, it provides you an additional way to get threats without having to necessarily keg smash everything, because you'll put it into a target. You want to get in a good position to do, like, have it pierce everything, and then when it returns to you, it just does an insane burst. Both of those trinkets are very strong. Now, in a perfect world, I would try to have Fearix Rage Heart. Unfortunately, I haven't been able. My guild hasn't even seen it drop yet, and I've done it on both heroic and normal. So I need to hopefully wait to rip it from Vault or eventually get it from like a guild run. But outside of that, there aren't really any great trinkets defensively. The only other thing I would recommend is getting a cheat death trinket from Galakron's Fall. So personally, I'm going to be farming that probably tonight. I'm going to be just slamming that key farm until I get some players on to maybe push a little IO from my guild, but we'll see. Not many of my guildmates are interested in pushing IO, so I don't know what I'm going to be doing this season, but yeah, we'll see. Raal is just kind of a long fight without Lust. I know some groups like to Lust this guy instead, but in terms of like throughput requirement, there isn't much the healer can do to like carry the group. A lot of the damage is just avoidable, especially via Wretch. When he does spawn the ads, yeah, there's a chance you might be standing in one, but as long as you're being careful about that kind of movement, it's pretty easy to dodge. Now you do see I did paralysis a guy in the back. That is a possibility. I wouldn't recommend CCing early on, but when you do have mobs that are coming in towards the end of the fight, it's very, it's very manageable to just throw a CC out or two. In this comp, we don't have many. We could technically repent, and we have imprison, and we have paralysis, but there's not really a need to do all of them. Just doing one at a time is also fine. Basically, the rule of thumb is when you come down into the basement, you want to be around 77, and then you need to pull this kind of group. And then what we do is we also pull the witch and the captain across the way, and we'll also do the mini boss. But since the mini boss is a little beefier, I'm going to chain it in eventually. Now this mob does apply a very nasty dot and a damage increase to the target. It can be dispelled on me, which is nice, so the healer just has to look out for that. But if you happen to run diffuse magic, you can also put it back onto the mob to make them take more damage. This is a good place to run diffuse magic on, what you call it, like fort weeks. But on a tyrannical week, I ended up just playing Yulon. Both are fine. Yulon's going to get you more healing, but diffuse is going to get you more survivability in specific instances, as well as a slight damage increase, because you're actually going to be doing damage with dots that are applied to you instead of just healing based on magic damage. But I've been playing with Yulons a lot more lately, and I've actually really been liking it. It makes me feel a little bit more sturdy in just these kind of magic-heavy dungeons, though I do recognize that diffuse can be optimized in a lot of cool ways. Our healer went down because he didn't use like any defensives there or throughput cooldowns. This etch that the Rune Weaver does, even on, tyrannical weeks, does so much damage. The only thing we're really looking out for as a tank is this cleave. Now, I don't know if I'm going to Tiger's Lust myself here. I think I end up getting stunned. Oh no, I broke it. I was playing last night or the other day, and I kept getting stunned by entangling like left and right because my mouse over macro for my Tiger's Lust kept going on other players. I was just like not playing well. But now I'm just waiting for our paladin to get here. He is right above us in the courtyard now. He's got quite a long way to go. So we'll start inching. Unfortunately, my warrior's going to lose his brand stacks. He has a nice weak aura for it. But yeah. Just kind of hanging out. I will say this, Brewmaster does feel pretty good this season. I think it lacks the kit that VDH brings, but the healing that it has through both Celestial Fortune, its new tier set, and things like Yulon is just makes it feel very, very tanky almost all the time. And it can, because of its like nature in terms of like stagger and how it deals with like big tank busters from like bosses in particular, the Brewmaster on Tyrannical weeks actually can put out a ton of like very competitive single target damage. And these pulls down here, you want to make sure you're saving a kick for these like soul charmers when they put down their candles. Their candles that they have down on the ground it's like a 75% DR. So you want to make sure you can move them off quickly. So in a perfect world, you'd have like a nice kick order set up. If not, people just paying attention to who and who doesn't have kicks whenever those casts kind of go out, you then want to follow it up quickly so you can get them out of those candles. There are groups that do this entire room in one pull. If you look at our timer, there's no reason to risk it. When you pull double Soul Charmer, their volleys, if they're not interrupted, will just pretty much wipe your group. And there's a ton of DR because you have double candles being cast. And they're typically fairly staggered. So when you are in a pug, you want to just kind of be careful with, who's kicking what. I should have kicked that volley there. I recognize that I had it up, but I also saw that we had no kicks afterwards, and I knew it was going to be volley, candle, and then cast again. So if I kicked there, I wouldn't be able to get the Soul Charmer out of candles. So that was a decision I made in the moment to recognize, like, okay, we'll live from the damage, and then I'll be able to get him out quicker so the pull will die. Also, I wanted the healer to do something. This boss fight, I think a lot of people freak out because towards the end of the fight, because people think that Lady Waycrest is the harder boss. You definitely want to be focusing Lord Waycrest every time here. So when we get into phase 3, just start slamming Lord Waycrest. I don't know if we end up lusting here or not. I can't remember because I didn't really care. This is a tough boss. It's fine to lust. Certain tanks can't deal with this guy as well. as like something like a Prot Warrior. The Brewmaster is pretty tanky on this fight. While the Tank Buster does hurt, Celestial Brew, things like, and just like Yulon is going to kind of carry that effect. If you have a solid range kick, it's not a bad idea to make sure you're kicking that Racking Cord Cast from Lady Waycrest. She can be targeted and interrupted. So, you know, classes that can benefit from having like 2-target cleave or putting dots on other targets like Shadow Priest, Ellie Shamans, Destrolox, they can basically do damage to Lady Waycrest now. I don't think it does much, but it can be funnel, and if you can get the interrupt on her, you'll actually reduce the damage your group takes. I know not all groups run a diseases spell for the pathogen, but basically the pathogen is just run it out, get it dispelled, and then come back to group. You pretty much want to run it to those like runic tombstone pillar things on the right hand side or like around the arena, because if you can keep this entire space cleared so players can dodge these cadenza swirls, that's preferred. While I am running detox, I'm not trying to dispel because it's typically not to be like it's a healer mechanic, but I don't want to like screw up the healer by dispelling early, especially if it's on the healer, right? Because he knows that he's going to dispel it and he's going to run out of group whenever he feels it's, you know, needed. You can run detox, which is nice. So if you're running with like a resto shaman, for example, who doesn't have a disease dispel, you can be that dispel for your group. It does do a lot of damage over its duration, so ideally you dispel it as quick as you can. But you want to be careful because if you dispel it on top of someone, it's going to spread to other people. While Lady Waycrest did come out and she has a little bit more health at 10% than he does at 100, you still want to prioritize Waycrest down. Because all you have to do for the Lady Waycrest is kick. And it's a 2-kick rotation. You just need 2 melee kicks on her. It's not very complicated. And then if you are feeling any kind of pain on this fight as a tank, just make sure you're using some form of mitigation whenever he does his wasting strike. It is nature damage, so you can use diffuse if you're running that, but again, Yulon is just kind of too strong in its current iteration, so we're going to keep playing that for now. So she's going to go down, and we're going to just roll right in here and pick up all of the horrors. These guys do burst, and they do a little damage, but they were nerfed, luckily, so pulling all 7 of these on a Tyrannical week is super, super fine. If you want to break them up on high fort weeks, it's not a bad idea either. If you look at our timer right now, we are going to miss the 2 chest by a little bit, but very, very comfortable at the current moment. And this will put us right up, it's like 101%, but I'm not going to overthink the route. Or it might be exactly, oh no, I think we ended up missing actually a little bit of count. Oh no, I'm dumb. Okay. It's about a 1.5 over. And now all we have to do is finish up the last boss fight. The last boss fight is honestly just like, make sure you have enough cleave for ads. In this comp specifically, we definitely have good amount of, like a good amount of like just cleave damage from the warrior and the DH. So luckily it'll pretty much always be in melee and it should just take good damage from everything. Me personally, I'm going to try to target it as often as I can. But we want to make sure we're also kicking the boss whenever he does Darkened Lightning. And then also the file, typically a healer mechanic, but honestly, anyone who's comfortable doing it, I just recommend doing it. As a tank, I did accidentally pick up that first one, but I'm not going to go out of my way to try to get it. I think that was that a Darkened Lightning cast that went off? No, that was Dread Essence. And then, yeah, of course, Dread Essence does a good bit of burst damage, and it will full heal any slaver that is alive or dead, but not burned. So it's very important that you use the alchemical, whatever it's called, fire, to burn these ads as soon as they die. But outside of that, just 2-target cleave. Make sure you're kind of ceasing the ads whenever they are channeling into your friend, because when they are channeling and they get that cast off, your party member is going to be stunned for the duration of the channel. So just make sure you're interrupting it so you don't lose any damage. And this fight is kind of a snooze. I think it's an underwhelming last boss. I felt like, maybe it's only because it's a 22, but back in the day, this boss was at least for me, it was kind of scary. I felt like ads could get out of control very quickly. I felt like they casted their spells more frequently. So I felt like you needed a lot more CC on this boss, but it feels like that's not that way anymore. But yeah, so you see these kind of fires spawning out in the corner of the arena. I'm assuming our tank will, or not our tank, our healer will always run out and grab them. If I personally happen to notice that someone's not picking it up for a few seconds, I'm going to roll out there and just grab it. because I know how to do the mechanic and I'm kind of watching the ad health a lot here. So it really just comes down to who's going to be best at doing it. But yeah, the boss is just going to go down here pretty shortly. So yeah, overall, I think Brewmaster is doing very well this season. Currently, there is a player named Ace2 at like near the top of the leaderboard at the time of recording this video. He does have Forset, but Brewmaster Forset, while I think it is weaker than some of the other tanks, I think Brewmaster is viable, and I actually would argue that most tanks are viable, even up to like the upper echelon of the bracket. It just really comes down to what your group is willing to play. VDH does have a lot more benefits, but just because it's a meta tank doesn't mean that other tanks aren't strong. So luckily I did loot my Lord Waycrest Signet on this run. This is probably your best dungeon trinket. It is high crit but low verse. 2 very strong stats for the Brewmaster. Crit mastery rings also fine. There's a ring from the raid that are good, but what's eventually going to end up happening is that Brewmasters are probably going to end up crafting their rings for that free socket without having to wait to have like a shitty vault. And that's it. That's the run. We finished at 135k overall. This was with an Augvoker. I did not have 4 set, but I did have 2 set. And I'm going to be, all my information and stuff will be in the description below. So if you want to see the route, see my build, and if I can find the log for this run, if someone was logging, I'll throw that in. But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed. If you have any questions about the run or the route or any suggestions, feel free to leave them in the comments below. All right, thanks so much for watching, and I'll catch you all in the next one. Peace.